Good morning and welcome to virtual worship with us here at the First Parish in Framingham. I'm the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, Senior Minister, and it's an honor and a joy and a privilege to serve as the Senior Minister of this congregation. Today's service is titled Careworn. We'll be looking at kind of exploring just how we are feeling today in this still in the midst pandemic world. It doesn't matter who you are, who you love, or how you move around in the world. It doesn't matter your age, your race, your ethnicity, your skin color, or who you love. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate and welcome all of who you are. So whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you, yes, you, dear one, are welcome here with us today. If this is your first time joining First Parish in Framingham for virtual worship, I'm so glad that you are here with us. If you want to learn more about who we are and you feel comfortable giving us some of your contact information, I encourage you to click that first link below. That will lead you to a form where you can sign up to receive some more information about who we are as First Parish. Our flowers this morning were given by Ruth and Larry Decker in memory of their granddaughter, Jennifer Durante. Now, our thinking might seem new. Our way of worshiping might seem new, but our congregation is not. We have been around since 1701, a part of the Framingham community since then. And love has held our congregation together since 1701. It's a love that's stronger and larger than any buildings or devices. So welcome to the First Parish in Framingham. It is a tradition at the beginning of every service that we have here at the First Parish in Framingham to light the chalice. The chalice is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. Carol will read our chalice lighting words today.
The Unitarian Universalists Global Chalice Lighting this month from the Unitarian Church of Burundi. Welcome into this holy time. How do people accept adversity that comes upon their lives? We light this chalice being conscious that our nature expects much good to happen, yet this does not prevent strong winds from striking us without any clear cause. Fire falls upon our possessions and consumes everything, and we find ourselves more hopeless than ever. That moment of despair separates us from our friends, our employees, our community, even our families, because we cannot meet their expectations. It is the time we curse instead of offering blessing. This is the time. This is the same time we judge instead of listen. In the time of despair, we isolate ourselves instead of expressing our thoughts and feelings. May this chalice sustain us through, though the wind has struck us hard, though fire has fallen on us, may it bring us together. May this chalice be a symbol of unity, hope, and blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Carol. And as I light the chalice in our sanctuary, and as the children of our congregation kindle their flames, you too are invited to light a candle at home. Once your flame is lit, I invite you to type into the chat, the chalice is lit in my home, or the chalice is lit in our home.
Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
You know me as your Director of Religious Exploration, but what you might not know about me is that I started my career in art history and in museums. And one of the first museums I worked at was the National Portrait Gallery at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. And it was there that I spent an entire summer immersed in the idea of how we express ourselves through portraiture. Now, my friend here, Vincent van Gogh, he's not at the Smithsonian nor at the National Portrait Gallery, but he's one of the best known self-portraitures in pop culture. He is so iconic with his red hair and his red beard and his classic style of brushwork. And we're all so familiar with him. But what you might not know about this particular work of art is that it was painted right at the end of his life. It was one of the very last self-portraits that he painted. And you can almost tell when you look at him, and you look in his eyes, at the crazy brushwork that's going on behind him, almost like he's telling you what his mental state was at the time. And that's one of the really neat things that self-portraiture can do. And so we're going to explore a little bit this woman. This is Helena Skorvbeck. She was born in Finland in the late 1800s and lived until the 1940s. And being a female artist at the time was pretty frowned upon. Sure, you could do it as a hobby, but to be a real artist, that was better left to the men, or so society told young Helena. This is one of her self-portraits from the when she was in her 50s, from 1915. And in it, she's telling you who she is. She's made some really distinct choices about this self-portrait. In it, she's staring right at you, challenging you, maybe. She's got her paint pot and paintbrushes behind her. Otherwise, pretty simple. And she's included her name, just as the masters of the Renaissance had done before her. See, this here is Albert Dürer from 1500. He's done the same thing, black background, put his name right there on it. And they're both challenging you, aren't they? Saying, yeah, I'm an artist. This is me. This is who I am. And as we think today about who our inner selves are and how we express that and how we share that with the world, I would invite you to go on this little journey here with Helena. This is her a few years later. When she was a 4-year-old child, she fell down the stairs and broke her hip. And it's why she spent so much time painting when her sisters and brothers were outside playing sports. Her hip never really fully healed, and she walked with a limp for the rest of her life. And that sense of who she was comes through in her artwork all the time. It's almost as if you've asked her, hey, Helena, how you doing today? How are you? And she's not saying, fine, thanks, how are you? She's not just glossing over that. Instead, she's sharing her emotion, her feelings, the way in which she wants you to think of her. As her life went on, she led a bit of a sad life, and she checked herself into a sanatorium, which is a fancy word for a type of hospital in which she was cared for at the very end of her life. And we see here a painting that she painted of herself 2 years before she died, one of her last self-portraits. And this process here that you see, where she stripped away the realism of what it looks like to paint your nose or to paint your eyes, and instead to share your very deep emotional self with the world. She stripped it all away and is conveying only emotion here. This last picture of her here that shows a progression. Here's another early self-portrait of herself in her 20s, and then the very, very last one that she painted at the end of her life. Vincent van Gogh said once in a letter to his brother that it is said, and I'm paraphrasing here, it is said that it is very difficult to know yourself, but it is even more difficult to paint yourself. And I think what he means by that is that to know yourself in the private of your own home, perhaps if you're staring at yourself in the mirror, that's one thing. But to share that with somebody else authentically, to share who you really are and what you're really feeling in the moment is the most difficult thing of all. So how do we do that together? How do we form authentic community with one another in which we tell ourselves and each other how we're doing? So the next time somebody says, hey, how's it going? Think through that answer. Share who you really are.
Because we are human, we experience great joy and great sorrow. This is the time that we set aside for sharing the things which weigh deepest on our hearts, our milestones, our happy and sad occasions. We'll have some prompts on the next screen that might give a little bit better order to our sharing if you have something that you wish to share, because I believe that a joy shared is joy expanded, and a sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting a burden. And boy, do we need more joy and our burdens shared. Of course, since we're gathering electronically and virtually, your privacy cannot be guaranteed. So if there's something that you think I need to know, or perhaps you want me to activate our Caritas team, feel free to send me an email.
Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
This is the time in our service that we set aside for contemplation, meditation, and prayer. So I invite you to get comfortable. That looks different for everybody. Maybe that's lying down on a bed. Maybe that's putting a shawl over you as you sit on the couch. Maybe it's planting your feet a little bit more on the ground. Maybe it's taking a sip of coffee or tea or water. Whatever you need to do to feel a little bit more present. And paying attention to your body, I invite you to do that as we enter into this time and space. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls each one of us by our true first name, the one who knew us before we were born, who calls us beloved. I give thanks for this community, for this gathering, for these people that make up the First Parish in Framingham. They've been a people of innovation and patience as well. I give thanks for the things that we have in our life, for the wind blowing through trees, for the smiles of friends that we know are there beneath the masks. We give thanks too for all those who have been vaccinated and all of those especially who brought those vaccines into fruition. People who lived out their passions and their professions. We give thanks. Our world feels weary as well. People everywhere, as they always have, living with illness, wondering if a treatment will work. Those people who are mourning the loss, mourning losses yesterday, losses that occurred months ago or years ago. We know that sometimes grief is tender and it feels like a spiral that we encounter again and again when we least expect it. May we be gentle with ourselves and others. My breath is taken away by the terrible COVID outbreak in India. The pictures of hospitals overflowing, oxygen shortages, and people dying is horrific. May those in power have compassion to work across borders to perhaps bring COVID vaccines to places that so desperately need it. May we too work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world. For some over this last week, our humanity has shown a little bit too much, perhaps. We've done things that we feel sorry for doing and know that we could have done them better. May we remember that we are loved and lovable, not in spite of these imperfections and our failures, but because of them. And may we also be reminded that we can always work to move ourselves into right relationship. We can always improve. Say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us sit in the quiet of our own separate homes so that we might rest, pray, or listen. And as we end our time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer, I invite you to take 3 breaths, each a breath of gratitude. My colleague, the Reverend Heather Christensen, writes these words that inspire us in our gathering of our generosity, in the sharing of our offering. Unitarian Universalism is a grand vision of a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. That vision is embodied in a few large congregations, numerous small, mid-sized congregations, and many, many small congregations. No matter its size, every congregation depends on each of its members, each one of you, by your commitment of time, energy, and resources. Helps make that grand vision real. Individually and together, we are Unitarian Universalists, building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. The morning offering will now be joyfully given and gratefully received. Our reading today is titled Dead Stars by Ada Limon. We will hear this reading twice.
Out here, there's a bowing even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash, the rolling containers a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin until you say, man, we really should learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust. I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you towards what's larger within us, toward how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said no? No to the rising tides, stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land. What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth? If we declared a clean night, if we stopped being terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out, after all of this is over.
Out here, there's a bowing even the trees are doing, winter's icy hand at the back of us all. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute, it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash, the rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, and Lynx. But mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust and I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you toward what's larger within us, toward how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said no? No to the rising tide. No, stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land. What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth, if we declared a clean night, if we stopped being so terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out, after all of this is over. There's a painting that hangs in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which I showed prior to the beginning of this sermon, but may remove for future sermons, and it's what I'm recalling in my address today. The painting is titled The Dean's Roll Call by Thomas Eakins. It portrays Dr. James William Holland, the longtime dean of the Jefferson Medical College. In the portrait, we see Dr. Holland in his academic robes, holding a folder much as he would before graduation. I was taken by this painting, perhaps because of the fact that I knew from across the hall, because I'm a nerd, that he had a doctoral degree in medicine just from the color of trim and the style of his robe. But I was more taken in when I looked at his face. His stance indicates someone who is comfortable in his authority and position. However, his face seems tired and serious and somewhat gaunt. His eyes express anxiety or fatigue. His son notes that perhaps this was because the sittings began about in January and lasted 2 months or so. He writes that his father was never physically very strong and that by that season of the year he was always tired out. What made it worse is that Eakins always insisted that he take the full pose standing, with the sunlight from the skylight full on his face. He would not even let him sit down when working on the head alone. It was quite the ordeal, his son recalls, and the result was a tense, almost haggard expression. The curatorial notes by Naomi H. Slip mention that while Eakins intended for the medical college to purchase the painting, they declined, opting for another portrait artist instead. Slip notes that perhaps this is because of Holland's careworn appearance that the college declined. His family, however, loved the painting and held on to it for quite a while. That word, careworn. I love compound words like that. Well, careworn means showing the effects of grief or anxiety. Think of it more like the effects of caring, the erosion and aging that caring causes. I identify with with Thomas Eakins' portrayal of Dr. Holland. I encountered it in the middle of study leave, and something about it just spoke to me. The medical college's declining it also spoke to something that's true. I'm not sure that we as a society desire authenticity, or we say that we want it, but when someone tells us that they're feeling tired, we get nervous. We're not sure what to do with that. I remember in my first semester of seminary, there was a conversation I had with a classmate where we repeated back and forth the usual greetings. Hi, how are you? I'm fine, and you? I'm good. Then we paused. It was the first semester. We were gearing up for our finals, and yikes, we were haggard. We were stressed. We were anxious. Either him or I said, actually, you know what? No, I am not fine. Here's what's going on. And of course, in that moment of honesty, the stress did not go away, but it at least lessened, and we got the help that we needed. I think a study group was formed, and we also made plans to celebrate the end of the semester. It feels safe to say that the pandemic is lasting longer than we thought it would. We have been traumatized, or at least careworn. We have lost. The scary thing is that while we are in the midst of a traumatic event, we actually don't know the full effects of the trauma. We don't know the impact that this pandemic has had on our spiritual, mental, or emotional health. We certainly have some inkling of its effect on physical health, but even in that realm, so much remains unseen. And while I am not a doctor, I think that the church can address something about the spiritual, mental, or emotional health. I do long to preach sermons about our history or our theology, or ones that tend to the direction of our congregation. But I think we still need to be considering the care of our careworn souls. During this time, looking at caregiver burnout seems wise, though I acknowledge it doesn't fully speak to the massive shift that we have experienced. We have all been caregivers, and we have all also received care. We have been compassionate and have become fatigued from that. We've all become careworn, and while caregiver burnout is not similar to caregiver fatigue, while caregiver burnout is similar to caregiver fatigue, there are differences. Compassion fatigue is the precursor to that burnout. And some of us know what our own check engine lights are. We know what our maintenance required lights are. Others don't, or they may be operating outside of the manufacturer's expectations and stressed in new ways. Ways that our bodies have not been stressed before. Our personal maintenance required lights can turn on when you look at a simple task and feel overwhelmed, not by the task, but simply by the fact that you're out of energy for the task. We can feel burned out, and we can know that our check engine lights are coming on when we lose our sense of humor, when no reasonable amount of sleep seems enough, when you feel unloved by people you know love you, when you regret making commitments you should have been excited about, and also when you become cynical. These are check engine lights for burnout. These are maintenance required lights. That's why it's important to reach out to others, to make sure that we get rest, to have rituals and eat good food, and continue to seek out joy. But friends, the truth is, this time is different. This time is unique. I think we are languishing, careworn and languishing human souls. Some of you know there was a beautifully well-written article in the New York Times recently by Adam Grant about this feeling of blah. I think many of us are feeling. A lot of us are just feeling meh. I remember the anxious excitement, and excitement doesn't fully capture it, of the early days of the pandemic, but there was that energy. Our flight or fight systems were on high alert, and then we found ways to cope. We knew that wearing masks would help. We found rituals, but it dragged on. Anguish turned to languish. Adam Grant writes, in psychology, we think about mental health on a spectrum from depression to flourishing. Now, flourishing is the peak of well-being. You have a strong sense of meaning, mastery, and mattering to others. Depression is the valley of ill-being. You feel despondent, drained, and worthless. Languishing is that neglected middle child of mental health. It's the void between depression and flourishing, the absence of well-being. You don't have symptoms of mental illness, but you're also not the picture of mental health either. You're not functioning at full capacity. He goes on to say that languishing dulls your motivation, disrupts your ability to focus, and triples the odds that you will cut back on work. He finishes by mentioning this. Part of the danger is that when you're languishing, you might not notice the dulling of delight or the dwindling of drive. Adam Grant is a fantastic writer, has a way with words here. You don't catch yourself slowly slipping into solitude. You're indifferent to your indifference. When you can't see your own suffering, you don't seek help or even do much to help yourself. One of the first steps, and the reason why I'm preaching a sermon like this on being careworn and languishing, one of the first steps is to name what you're feeling. There is such power in naming emotions that we're feeling. It reminds us, because we have a definition and all of a sudden we can talk to our friends about it, that we are not alone. Once you've named it, there are some other good antidotes that Adam Grant suggests. One of them is to get into a state of flow. Sometimes this is a project that's going to take a while. Other times it's watching a whole TV series on Netflix, both of which are things I totally recommend. Also, give yourself uninterrupted time when you're not being distracted. Focus on small goals, create small wins. It's why each week after filming this sermon, I try to perfect my pizza dough recipe and my pizza cooking methods. It's an ongoing little project that has helped quite a bit. It's a tasty project as well, but it's helped quite a bit in the late stages of the pandemic. Adam Grant's article concludes by saying this: languishing is not merely in our heads, he writes, it's in our circumstances. You can't heal a sick culture with personal bandages. We still live in a world that normalizes physical health challenges, but stigmatizes mental health challenges. As we head into a new post-pandemic reality, it's time to rethink our understanding of mental health and well-being. Not depressed doesn't mean you're not struggling. Not burned out doesn't mean you're fired up. By acknowledging that so many of us are languishing, we can start giving voice to quiet despair and lighting a path out of the void. I do encourage you to read the rest of Adam Grant's article. It is wonderful. I think the key in all of this, friends, is to find joy. Find joy. I think back to the poem Dead Stars by Ada Limon that we heard earlier twice. Also, if you came to reading poetry as a spiritual practice this week, or the Frontline Workers Gathering last week, you heard it there as well. For me, this poem is an invitation to remember that we can find nature even when we look out at the night sky at the edge of our driveways while we've taken out the recycling or the trash. We have to remember as well that there are other constellations to notice in the night sky, other trees in the forest. If we focus on one thing, we might lose sight of everything else around it. While we are dead stars too, we're also not unspectacular things, which means we're spectacular things, friends. Even in our languishing souls, with our careworn faces, may it be so, and amen.
Be the helper nothing daunts, doubt of friend or taunt of foe. Ever strive for liberty, show the path that life should go. Be that filter trusting good, bitter though the test may be. Through all ages they are bright, though they build in agony. Be the teacher faith directs, move beyond the old frontier. Though the fright and fear that fade, be tomorrow's pioneer.
I invite you now to extinguish the flames that you lit at the beginning of our service. And as you do so, please type into the chat, I carry the flame, or we carry the flame. This is a commitment to live out our loving faith's message out in the world. As we close this browser window and go out into our wide world, let us take the light of love and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may we be guided safely back to this spiritual community. May the flame carry us, and may we carry the flame always. Amen, and go in peace.